You know those cool visual effects you see in manga? Like speed lines that make a character look super fast, or sweat drops that show they're totally freaking out, or sound effects that show a big impact. Those are all manga effects. They might just seem like small details, but they're actually great storytelling tools. They create movement and drama. They bring a kind of intensity that makes manga so unique. And the best part? They're easy to use. Take it from our pro mangaka mentors with over 50 years in the industry. With their guidance, we've helped over 400 beginner mangakas over the last 3 years to learn how to use these manga effects. And in this video, we'll teach you how you can too. Have you been struggling to create your first manga for years? If you're tired of feeling stuck and constantly doubting yourself, then we invite you to apply to our online one-shot manga drawing program. We'll give you the structure and exact roadmap on how you can finally create your first manga. You'll learn directly from pro-Japanese mangakas and published manga artists through weekly live Zoom training sessions. Plus, you'll be in a community of fellow aspiring mangakas who are working towards the same goals. Our coaches are gonna hold your hand and keep you accountable so you can finally make your manga dreams a reality. Book a free manga consultation call with us to see if we're a good fit to work together. The link is in the description. I want you to look at these two panels of the same scene. It's a man running away. Scene A has completely no manga effects, while Scene B uses different kinds of effects. They give off two completely different feelings, right? Scene A kind of feels like a guy going out for a casual jog, while Scene B feels more dramatic. Like the guy is running for his life, and it looks like he's running away from something that's chasing him. And those little details that you see, like the sweat drop, the speed lines, the impact of his steps, even the sound effects of him wheezing, these are the manga effects that give your manga a little bit more oomph. They help you sell the moment in each panel. So even though your readers aren't exactly watching a movie, they still feel the intensity, the movement. They go through a roller coaster of emotions as they read your manga. Now, let's go through the different manga effects: Manpu, motion lines, background effects, and sound effects. First, let's talk about Manpu. What is Manpu? Manpu means manga symbols in Japanese. They're symbols unique to manga, and they're used to represent a certain feeling. Just like how there are so many types of emotions, there are all kinds of manpu to represent those emotions. Here are some of the most common ones. First is blushing lines. They're small vertical lines drawn in either both or one of your character's cheeks. You can use them to show that your character is feeling embarrassed, shy, or flustered. Next are shadow lines. These are vertical or horizontal lines that appear on a character's face. You can draw them under the eyes or all throughout the background. These lines can represent distress, anxiety, exhaustion, or sickness. Next is the vein mark. It's a shape representing a popping vein. When you see this, it usually means that your character is angry or irritated. Sweat drops. You can sometimes see sweat drops on a character's face or flicking off of it. The sweat represents your character's nerves. Depending on the context, it can mean embarrassment, worry, fear, or panic. Lastly, the forehead shadow. This shadow hangs over the top half of your character's face. It can convey disgust, fear, anger, disappointment, or mystery. Overall, you can use it to portray your character's inner negative mental state.
I want to die, so I'm going home.
Next, let's talk about motion lines. They're lines that represent movement and speed of an object or person. They're how mangakas show movement with just drawings. For example, if you were to draw a car by itself, how would you know if it's moving or not? Adding motion lines can make all the difference. Just compare these two panels. Can you notice the difference? There are different types of motion lines for all kinds of movement. First, let's talk about trajectory lines. This is the most common type of motion line. It represents the speed and movement of an action. It's used to represent the direction and intensity. It's usually drawn to emphasize a kick or a punch. Next are your turning lines. They're curved or spiral lines drawn around an object or character to indicate a circular or turning motion, like shaking one's head or a character turning. Next is explosion lines. They're bold, jagged lines drawn in a radial or circular pattern. They're typically used to show strong impact or force, like an explosion or a burst of speed. Lastly, your stirring lines. They're motion lines that don't show movement, but rather the intensity of a scene, like when your characters are cheering, shouting, or experiencing shock. These lines are used to visually show the emotional high or low of the scene. Next, let's move on to background effects. They're used to create a setting, mood, or atmosphere in a scene. These effects can take up all or a majority of a panel's interior space. Let's talk about the different kinds of background effects. First are speed lines. They have a similar function to the motion lines we mentioned before, but here, speed lines are used in the background and usually take up most of the panel space. This creates a dynamic feel to the overall scene rather than just a specific character or object. To better understand the difference between motion lines and speed lines, check out these two manga pages. This is a page from Sakamoto Days. You see speed lines drawn in a circular and horizontal pattern. The lines are drawn in the background to show the motion of each scene. Meanwhile, here's a page from Naruto. You see motion lines drawn on the characters' limbs and bodies. There are motion lines following Naruto's swift kick, and there are lines following Kakashi's quick duck. You can also use both motion and speed lines together, like in this page from Hajime no Ippo. The motion lines emphasize the punch, while the speed lines below both characters highlight the intense speed of the scene. Next, let's talk about focus lines. They're literally meant to make a viewer focus on something using lines and streaks. They direct your viewer's eyes to a specific area or character in the scene. Next, you can use uneasy lines. They're shaky or irregular lines in a background to convey a sense of unease or tension. Next is the beta flash. Beta in Japanese means solid blackening, and a beta flash is a white flash in a solid black background. You can use it as a speech bubble, like an internal thought, a realization mark, or as lightning to represent shock. Next are dripping lines. These are lines that drip down from the top of a panel. Depending on the context, it can represent sadness, depression, shock, or disappointment. Next is bokeh. The bokeh effect uses soft, diffused, circular screen tones. It's often used in romantic, soothing, or cute scenes. They could be shaped like soap bubbles or just simple geometric shapes. It's literally romanticizing a scene by adding a filter over it to make the scene look more soft and light. And speaking of romanticizing scenes, flowers and sparkles are also used to do the same effect. It's commonly used in a lot of shoujo manga. Finally, let's talk about sound effects. And Japanese manga has a lot of them, like don for a big boom or impact, or shin for awkward silence, or kya for screams. There are different kinds of sound effects, and in Japanese, they use a lot of onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia are words that mimic actual sounds you can hear. For example, what's the sound of a frog? Ribbit, ribbit. The sound of a dog? Bow wow. The sound of a clock? Tick tock. Those are all onomatopoeia. Of course, in Japanese, they're represented differently. The sound of a frog in Japanese is kero kero. The sound of a dog, wan wan. The sound of a clock, kachi kachi. The Japanese language also has quite a bit of onomatopoeia that describes feelings or actions that don't really make a sound but give off an impression. For example, kira kira translates to sparkle sparkle. I mean, an object doesn't really make an actual sound when it sparkles, right? But there's a word for it in Japanese. Let's bring back our earlier example. Shin is a Japanese onomatopoeia that represents awkward silence. But of course, there's no sound for silence. Adding these different sound effects gives more life to your manga. Your readers can feel the weight of the situation when your character goes doki doki when they have a romantic moment with their crush. Don't be scared to draw those little details. You don't need to draw them in Japanese either. You can just use English sound effects like boom or crack or ha 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 or splotch or whoosh. So next time you read your manga, try to observe the different kinds of sound effects being used in different situations. If you're ready to learn these manga effects and all the different skills and techniques you need to create a manga that you feel proud of, then we invite you to join our online one-shot manga drawing program. You'll have pro mangakas acting as your editors, and you can ask questions and get direct feedback on your work during our weekly live Zoom training sessions. Let's make your manga dreams a reality this year. You can book a free manga consultation call with us to see if we're a good fit to work together. The link to sign up is in the description. In the meantime, you can check out this video to learn 3 pro mangaka tips that you need to apply to your manga right now.